Hey, paisanos, it's the Super Mario Brothers Super Show!
With the princess and the others, hanging with the plumbers, you'll be hooked on the brothers to the brim. I say hooked on the brothers,
Blood Whistle is the stupidest piece of non-literature I have ever willingly subject myself to. I think the fact that the grammar and writing style aren't completely childish and incompetent in nature actually makes this worse. Cause it's like, a fucking adult wrote this. A grown-ass man wrote this fucking Super Mario Brothers creepypasta. And not even as a joke, like I Hate You was. See, the worst thing about Blood Whistle is not the fact that it is yet another played out as fuck haunted video game story. It is not the fact that the main character is quite possibly even stupider than the protagonist of Sonic.exe. And it is not the horribly pretentious writing style laced in purple prose. Is the fact that Blood Whistle is so long and so boring that even describing it would stop being funny after a certain point. When Bad Creepypasta read this story, not only were 2/3 of the cast reading other, much better pieces of literature because they were so bored, but they had to resort to singing out the ending just to get through it without falling the fuck asleep.
Flesh, eyes, and other internal organs and tissues constituted the walls and ground.
There are 8 worlds in this game, all described in excruciating detail. So much so that picking apart every single detail and just calling it stupid would not be worth it. I recently watched this long-ass video series about just why The Legend of Korra Book 2 is an atrocity against humanity, and the guy who made the video said at one point that the best way to get an idea of what is wrong with Book 2 is just to watch it for yourself, because it is so painfully obvious how bad it is that you could just look at it and see, oh yeah, that's fucking garbage.
See, I can't even be mad anymore. I've seen it so many times that it's just like,
why are we still?
And I think the same general principle applies to Blood Whistle. The only difference is that Blood Whistle doesn't have the Varric it needs to lift it above the 1 out of 10 that it deserves. But I will try my best to describe the most major problems with this story. None of this nitpicky McDiggy bullshit, because that would not be fucking worth this story's time. So let's get into Blood Whistle. I honestly think this is the stupidest protagonist I've ever seen in anything. Worse than Sonic.exe. Either round. Sonic.exe's protagonist's irrational behavior could at least be explained by, other issues they might have had, but this guy has no excuse for acting the way he does throughout the story. This guy, Bradley, he gets a link to a ROM from his friend that's supposed to be a scary hack of Super Mario Bros. 3. He knows going in that it's supposed to be scary and macabre, but upon discovering that it is in fact scary and macabre, he acts like it's a bigger travesty than, well, Legend of Korra Book 2, I guess. He overreacts to every little thing that happens, and weirdest of all, treats the Mario in the game as a real person who these experiences are actually happening to. Therefore, the person who made this hack must be some kind of monster for putting poor Super Mario through all these horrible tortures. Boy, nobody showed this guy Pokemon Snakewood. Mostly because it's just kind of bad. Also, that doesn't even make all that much sense, considering how much torment Mario goes through in the normal games. Mario gets his kind of girlfriend kidnapped by a giant fucking turtle dragon and has to go through trial after trial in blistering deserts and ice-cold wastelands before going through a lava-filled castle to fight the turtle dragon, only to have to do it all over again by the next game, all the while dying constantly and being revived over and over again. If any of that ever happened to you, you would probably describe it as the most fucked up series of events that has ever happened to me, and Mario's done it for the past like 30 something years. You might remember way back in Laughing Jack, I said that there was a pasta this season that would destroy the expectation of a character not instantly assuming the events taking place are not paranormal. This is that story. And this is why. Our protagonist is entirely too eager to assume that this game is a work of pure evil.
Evil!
Despite nothing paranormal happening. These two factors, his overreaction to scary events despite knowing full well it's a scary game, and his constant desire to treat Mario as a person, start off funny, but rapidly get frustrating to read because it takes him fucking ages to explain himself, and the entire time we're waiting on this explanation, we have to trudge painfully through the boring ass gameplay. One thing that I do find funny is that someone traces the blog he's posting everything on back to him and informs campus police that he's probably suicidal and crazy because he's suicidal and crazy. Seriously, the game eventually gets to him so badly that he just decides he's going to take his own life once he's done playing it, instead of doing literally anything else. I guess you could argue that once he started playing the game, it made him, like, go crazy, but the game never shows any sign at all of being anything other than well programmed. Even at the end, when Mario refers to him by his first name, you can do that in a game. I mentioned it earlier this season, Doki Doki Literature Club has Monica do that at the very end of the game by reading the name on your system. So if you use your first name as your username, which I do, yeah, that would work.
Oh my god, she jump scared me!
Or more likely, the friend who sent him the game just programmed it in such a way that it specifically said his name to freak him out. So every event in the game can be explained by a talented programmer wasting his time making a Super Mario hack that like one dude is going to play. Absolutely nothing is paranormal here. So even Sonic.exe has a leg up on that. Even the hyper-realistic graphics. Because look at this. Look at this fucking thing. Look at this realistic blood. Whoever made this may be a good programmer, but they're not a talented sprite artist. I think Bradley just has low standards for this sort of thing. I think the author of this story probably shits out thesauruses because the prose in this story is horribly distracting to the point where, yes, it needs its own fucking segment. I'm just gonna say that if you're writing a story about a child-friendly video game, the vast majority of your audience is going to be children, or at the very least adults nostalgic for the game. Not that anyone would even know what the story is about going in, because the title is totally unclear about what kind of story this even is, except that it has blood in it and I guess a whistle? I mean, granted, it's not as bad as something like The Kill Waker, where you're just replacing a word in the title with blood or kill or flesh. But if you just looked at the title, you probably wouldn't associate it with the Super Mario Warp Whistle. It's too loose a connection. A much more appropriate title would be something like Mario's Torment, since that's what the whole thing is about. But back to the writing style. This is a horribly pretentious means of writing what is a very simple story. This is supposed to be an accessible story about one of the most famous video game characters of all time, but it is buried behind a wall of what I can only describe as the Saurus Fellatio. Like, I understand, you're trying to sound sophisticated so your story doesn't seem like garbage, but you are actively making your garbage story longer and more boring to read by padding it out with fancy, meaningless words that a good portion of your audience isn't going to understand. Some of the words aren't even used correctly, so it's not like you understand them either. Why would you exploit the game? That doesn't make any fucking sense. It reminds me of when someone gets a tattoo of some foreign word and it actually says something like, I eat cat poop, but they think it means something completely different. In universe, this probably stands to alienate a lot of Bradley's supposed audience on top of the actual audience reading the story. He's writing this all out on a blog, and apparently he gets thousands of followers by the time the story has even reached the halfway mark. This is fucking nonsense. Viral trends do tend to follow spooky games, but this is not a spooky game. And even if it was, he doesn't even show the actual gameplay. He just describes it outside of the one glorious picture we're given. Even I Hate You, a fucking joke pasta, had the effort to put in a few pictures, even if Mario had 2 sets of eyebrows at the end. This is kind of why a lot of famous video game pastas have some kind of visual accompaniment. Because if you don't, you get boring shit just described to you like in Blood Whistle, and it gets lame for the kids who are reading it. Kids like picture books. If you can somehow make a creepypasta into a pop-up book, that's even better. I fucking love those things when I was a kid. Even Jeff the Killer had a now iconic picture to go along with it. That's why kids loved it. They don't care about the story. That goes right over their heads in terms of quality. This and this are no good. You're not appealing to your core audience at all. If your aim is to put your audience to sleep, however, you're doing just fucking dandy at that. Yeah, keep up the good work. So what makes a story boring exactly? Well, using Blood Whistle as an example, let's use this phrase. Yeah, I've seen this all before. Now what? That's a pretty simple way of saying if you repeat the same crap over and over again with only superficial differences in between each reiteration, people are going to get fucking bored. That's why people don't like the Endless 8 episodes of Haruhi Suzumiya, because it's all the same fucking shit. Endless 8 is actually a good comparison to make to this, because you have 8 entire worlds to go through, just as there were 8 episodes to sit through. Unless you skipped like 5 of them, which I did. As much as people love repetition in terms of hearing the same generic pop song on the radio or retweeting the latest unfunny meme, when you're actually invested in something, that can kill it for you. Now, repetition isn't always a bad thing. Some characters, for instance, are well known for basically just saying the same thing over and over again, but it gets to a problem when it bleeds into the very foundation of your story in an unintentional way. Like, okay, if you're writing some kind of time travel story about the futility of trying and failing again and again, then yes, repetition is good to use there. But if it's a simple point A to point B story, then all you're doing is wasting everyone's time if you're lucky enough to keep their attention. Noticing negative patterns can destroy media for you. So if by World 2 in Blood Whistle you realize this is the exact same thing as the last world but in a different setting, that's a pretty good point to jump fucking ship on. Or at the very least skip to the end to see what the payoff is for all the crap you skipped. The now what in the phrase we used above is the most important part of the whole thing. If an event repeats itself, does that have any impact on the story? Does it mean anything? In Blood Whistle, the answer every single time is no, because there is no consequence for anything that happens until the very end when Bradley decides to just kill himself for no reason. No matter how much torture porn Mario endures, he always just comes back to go through it all again. No matter how much Bradley sees Mario's pain, he doesn't do anything about it despite his psychotic convictions, and none of the set pieces or events that take place have anything to do with anything Bradley does or affect him in any way more than the beginning of the story does. This is only slightly better than Life is Strange in terms of a story that has no consequences, because at least the ending is definitive and I guess happens as a result of the events that take place in the story and not some nebulous time travel force that contrives events to happen in a specific way. But just like Life is Strange, all of the crap that happened in the middle, the bulk of the content, was ultimately completely meaningless. You wasted the vast majority of your time as a reader on the content that ultimately mattered the least. And as a writer, that is insulting to your audience. For everyone who's seen those videos of mine, this is the same problem I had with Godzilla NES. The middle of the story starts to become kind of a slog to get through because ultimately, none of the new set pieces or monsters really mean anything, and little to no progress is being made in terms of the story, making the sudden ending even more frustrating because time was spent on what is, in the end, meaningless, and it could have been devoted to setting up this conclusion a little bit better. Blood Whistle is this problem on fucking steroids, because there are no points of interest throughout the entire story to hook you in the first place. The beginning of Godzilla NES is at least interesting, and the twists, turns, and artwork are enough to keep you going even through the sloggy bits, but Blood Whistle is dull from the word go. It is every video game pasta you've ever read except longer, and the protagonist is completely insufferable due to his frustrating lack of rationality. That is not something I want to waste my time on, and fuck you for thinking it is, author. What, you actually want me to describe the plot of Blood Whistle in detail? Like a fucking Nostalgia Critic play-by-play? No. No, that is not worth it. Because believe me when I say, it's just not all that funny to begin with. Yes, I could make fun of the Illuminati line or the, I think there were other funny moments in it. But going through each scene is doing you a disservice. So fuck it. Here's the lightning round. It's the blog of a college student before he suicided. He got a Mario 3 hack from his friend who never shows up again in the story and has no impact on the plot aside from giving him this hack. He wastes the entire first day of his blog talking about how he's going to play it tomorrow and it'll be super rad and not boring, and he brings up Ben from Ben Drowned, which makes me contemplate suicide long before that becomes a theme in the story. The second day is even more pointless. He just says that he needs to find a secret that'll finally make the game actually spooky. Good fucking luck with that. The next day he waxes philosophically for like 6 paragraphs on the mere fact that the game is so horribly evil. Not even what it did, just the fact that it is in fact evil. He finds the eponymous Blood Whistle and it stabs Mario in the chest a couple times and warps him someplace. That's about all that actually happens, but it takes like 50 times longer to actually happen in the story. I'd also like to point out that at this point in the story, nothing had even happened. And yet, before what's supposed to be the actually spooky part, he managed to get 5,000 followers on his blog within 2 days. Then he goes to a desert world. He gets stabbed again and then brutalized by Bowser's family.
Illuminati.
He has a dream about flutes or something. This is apparently an indicator of paranormal events, even though he's obviously paranoid about this whistle-themed game, and his dreams would likely reflect that. Then it's a water world. He gets stabbed. Water is blood, eaten by fish. Next day, campus police show up because he got doxxed for being a fucking Looney Tune. Also, he has 50,000 followers. It's been like 4 days and nothing has happened. This isn't even like a lolcow or anything. I'm pretty sure most of his followers are earnest and probably also want to suck his massive penis. Then it's the fourth world. I don't care anymore. It's like meat or blood or something. He probably gets stabbed. He mentions fearing for his own life the next day, even though at this point he's already planning to kill himself, so what the fuck is he afraid of even? Sky level. Who cares? Cthulhu's there, I guess.
And it's Cthulhu. Of course it's Cthulhu. Who else would it be? We got Cthulhu.
The next day, the first line he says is that he's starting to not care anymore, and I've never sympathized with the character more in my entire life. Ice World. It's pretty cool. This guy isn't used to watching Mario die yet. I can't help but wonder how he feels when Mario dies in a normal game. He's finally gonna fucking kill himself, and again, I find myself sympathizing with him. Hell level. Peach makes a pun about Edge, which I find ironic coming from the story that is 80% Super Mario torture porn. So Mario dies, Bradley shoves a flute in his throat and dies, and I wanna die. That's Blood Whistle. You missed literally nothing. This is one of the worst fucking things I've ever read. I've talked before elsewhere about how difficult it is to try and come up with new material for video game pastas, and this story is part of why that is. What the fuck can I say about Mario getting tortured over slightly different set pieces? That's lame. This story is lame. Annoying protagonist who's up his own ass down to his fucking writing style. Boring story and shit concept from the word go. Toe to tip, this is fucking sewage. It had no potential whatsoever. I've seen people try to make rewrites of other stories I've covered. I've even dabbled in it a bit myself, but I wouldn't blame any of those people who try to turn garbage into gold if you didn't want to touch this one. I don't. I just want to put Blood Whistle behind me and... no, that sounds wrong. Point is, I would rather get impaled by the Blood Whistle itself than have to read this story again. You know, come to think of it, that also sounds kind of sexual. Point is, the story sucks, but we're not quite done here just yet, because we've got another Super Mario creepypasta coming up next episode that is going to blow this one out of the water. So I hope you guys are ready for that, because it's going to be amazing. Thank you all so much for watching. Here's all the list of patrons and my Twitter and all that good shit. I hope to see you all next time.